Fala pessoal do SharpCast, muito bom dia, muito boa tarde ou boa noite. Estamos aqui indo para mais um episódio, agora nós já estamos chegando no 18º e hoje a gente vai receber um convidado muito especial que é o Rob Pizzola. Hoje o nosso amigo Cheque vai fazer esse episódio sozinho, vocês daqui a pouquinho vão ver eles, mas eu passei aqui antes só para dar um recadinho muito especial para vocês, que é para falar um pouco dos nossos patrocinadores, que são a Betbra e a Betdex. A Betbra, que é uma casa que a gente já tem utilizado há muito tempo aqui nas nossas operações, e como vocês já sabem, ela está ajudando a gente a trazer aqui esse episódio para vocês. E o que é, né, a Betbra e qual que é a diferença dela? Ela é uma book que é um espelho da Pinnacle e também da Betfair, ou seja, você tem ali uma casa 2 em 1, que é uma exchange e também uma sportsbook, e lá você vai encontrar uma das melhores odds do mercado e também funcionalidades diferentes que vão te ajudar aí no seu dia a dia. Então, se você quer conhecer, tem o QR Code aqui na tela ou o link aqui embaixo, só você clicar lá que vocês vão ser diretamente direcionados para lá. E também, nós também estamos contando aqui com a Betdex, que é uma exchange aí totalmente inovadora no mercado, que tem uma tecnologia bem diferente. E o principal delas são as odds. Você muito dificilmente vai encontrar odds melhores que ela no mercado. Então, vale a pena vocês conferirem, o link está aqui embaixo. E qualquer dúvida é só chamar a gente também, que a gente troca uma ideia. Fechou? Vou passar a bola aqui para o nosso amigão Cheque e para o Rob.
Bom dia, pessoal. Estou a falar aqui de Portugal. Eu estou sozinho, não tenho os meus hosts e os meus parceiros, nem o Divino, nem o Luquinhas connosco para fazer esta apresentação, mas é um prazer estar de novo com vocês e trazemos-vos um convidado muito especial, alguém que eu sigo há muito tempo na indústria e no conteúdo. Ele vive no Canadá, é canadiano, é um italo-canadiano que há muitos anos trabalha nas apostas e é o Rob. Rob, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. So Rob, we have just had a little time to speak a little bit about this journey, and I need to start with some questions and about your background and your journey. You started the journey as a bettor in a very young age. And I would like you to just give us a hint about how did you all started for you? What was your first bet like, and how did it start?
Yeah, so when I was in high school, betting was pretty common amongst my high school, and I'm a huge sports fan. And basically, I got sucked into betting at a very early age when I had friends around school who were talking about their big winnings. On American football, on hockey, on basketball. And my immediate reaction was, well, I watch more sports than all of these guys. So there's no way that I shouldn't be able to win money myself. So I was able to find a local bookie back in the day, gave me, a PPH account and bet through there. And that started when I was 16. And unfortunately, probably the first 5 to 10 years of my betting experience were pretty negative because I watch a ton of sports, like I said, but I was consistently losing money betting. I was working, losing paychecks betting. I was actually at one point even a full-time poker player and doing very successful playing poker, but losing all that money back in sports betting as well. So the first 10 years of my betting career were as a pure casual bettor, not really understanding how betting markets work, what it took to actually beat books. I was buying betting picks, tailing other people in the early stages of Twitter. So pretty much everything that you can do wrong, I did in my early experience of betting.
Well, that's a great answer because I started myself as a losing bettor. And this is something that it's very complex sometimes for people to recognize, because everybody says, "Oh, I'm so sharp." No, we are not sharp. We paid our dues. We paid our with our real money. So you and I, from that point of view, we are very similar. It's very nice to see what's happening with the industry now. I'm very attentive to what is happening now in United States and Canada, because now you have content emerging everywhere. Everybody's creating content, from journalists to, I don't know, the touts are everywhere, and everybody's so sharp. Everybody's sharp. And I see, look, we need honest guys to say, Look, this is difficult. This is getting harder and harder. We are betting against each other, and probably only some will survive. But okay, and your honest was really, really great because you said, okay, I started as a losing better, and then you start to approach analytical methodologies, probably, and that made some influence on your decision making process. Correct?
Yeah, so in university, I was studying statistics and computer science. So I'm losing all this money betting on sports. Eventually, I finally say to myself, I have to take a break from this. There's no sense in me continuously losing. Let me see if I can approach this in a different way. And I started to leverage my statistics background to see if I could apply math to sports. And before I actually just started betting the stuff myself, I was actually just mostly tracking it. I spent years not even betting on sports, but this became a hobby for me. How accurately can I predict games? What are my error metrics looking like? If I was betting, would I be making money right now? So I kind of just viewed it as more of a side hobby for entertainment purposes, and seeing if I could approach things from a completely different direction. And then I started to realize, okay, I have some momentum here. I'm doing well. This was also during the emergence of daily fantasy sports in North America. And I started playing DFS and being able to apply my projections with some game theory. And I was doing really well to the point where I was making more money than I was in my day job. And it's, then all these things start to flow into your head of, okay, I got something here. Can I do this for a living going forwards? But it did take several years of that losing and teaching me that if I just go through this approach of watching games and trying to handicap games, I'm not going to get anywhere. I need to figure out some other sustainable way to do this, or I just might as well not do it altogether.
Yeah, that's one way, because that's curious, because look, you and I, we are still young. I'm in my 40s. You are in 30s, probably beginning in the 40s some year now. But it's very funny because nowadays we only listen to the guys talking, and everybody is a top-down better. And you are talking me of origination, and back in the day, maybe only Spanky and his crew were top-downing, because everybody started originating some kind of sport, niche leagues. I started with the most complex, or one of the most complex of them myself, the soccer market. So, and you, as I think I'm correct, maybe NHL, MLB. How was it?
Yeah. So those were the main ones for me. Obviously, I'm Canadian, so naturally, hockey is something that's I've always been passionate about. So that was one area where I'm like, okay, I should be able to do this. I also loved baseball back in the day, a lot more than I do now. And those were the original sports for me before I started to venture into American football as well. But I kind of took it one sport at a time, to be honest with you. I didn't want to overwhelm myself and try to do too many things at once, and kind of just carved out my niche with those specific sports, and had success doing that. But, there's different approaches. I personally now also do some top-down betting, just because it's a very efficient way to bet for me nowadays, right? Origination, people don't understand. You're setting numbers on games, but you might only have a couple edges in the morning, and then you have to wait over the course of the day for injury information and lineups to change. And it's really hard to accumulate volume via that method. Whereas top down, you can just pick off all sorts of prices from different sports books all day long, and spend very minimal time on it. So I understand the allure to that betting style, because it's very economical. But I guess maybe it's even an ego in me in some ways. The origination will always be a part of what I do, just because I almost don't even view the top down as sports betting. It's just, it is in a way, because it's a sports betting market, but it's very robotic, so to speak, where you could really train anyone in the world to be a top down bettor. Anyone with some practice. The other way around, and this is not to discriminate against one betting style, but the ego part of me wants to actually beat sports in a way where I am beating the market. Like it's a competition, right, against other people in the market, and that competitive nature in me always wanted to go with the originator approach.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand the mechanics inside the sports that move in the 110. They're completely different because sometimes your second best is bet on the opposite team. So the second best team, you will go the other way around. So you middle. It's different when you are in other types of sports like soccer. For soccer, I'm using your terminology, soccer, because here in Europe it's football. But okay, let's call it soccer. And but you being an Italian, being a passion Italian man, I'm really sure you never tried soccer. You never tried to bet actual soccer, not even for volume or.
So by the time I started to really understand how the betting market works,
Yeah.
soccer just became it was, I don't want to say overwhelming, but when you look at the limits on soccer games relative to, let's say, a hockey game, right? English Premier League, Pinnacle, Chris taking 250K a pop on a game versus an NHL game where it's 10K a pop, 20K a pop. You just, I think for me, it always felt very daunting. How am I going to compete against the best groups in the world on soccer? You know, you hear about Tony Bloom and Star Lizard and 50 quants working underneath him. And for me, it was just like, I don't really want to compete in that market. You know, what was really interesting is when I first got connected with a larger betting group and I was providing them with NHL numbers, they basically said to me, like, we don't really know of a lot of people who are betting NHL at scale, and your stuff is good. And that kind of drove me to work even harder on NHL and being the best in that particular sport. I do have a passion for soccer. I grew up watching Italian soccer with my grandfather, cheering for different teams, but we used to watch soccer every Saturday and Sunday together. I love the sport, but I just never got into it. And by the time I was actually going to get started, it just seemed too daunting for me to try to compete with the best in that market. And I kind of just wanted to stick in my own lane.
You're probably correct. Nowadays, it's a little bit different to beat soccer because with the props appearing into the world, the props are very common in the US sports for many years, but nowadays they are very strong in soccer in Europe. So the syndicates, they all have quants producing numbers for the props, and if you put those props correctly, you have very nice edges sometimes. I want to change, to touch a different topic here, because you are an expert bettor, in my opinion, and you are an expert content creator. I admire what you are doing with Circlesoff. I would like you to talk a little bit with us what is Circlesoff and the importance, because what I admire the most in Circlesoff is that either you and your co-host Johnny, you guys don't sell picks. Your guys are just creating content, having good guests there, and you are completely aside for what's now, because we have other types of podcasts that now are maybe in a tendency to go with the content towards what the market is asking, and you guys are right there. Okay, we are not going to give you picks right here. Tell us, because that's for sure challenging, that's complex, and I want you to explain us how can you guys create such a good product with not selling the soul to the devil.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's pros and cons to it. So Circles Off is more of an educational style podcast. That was the vision that we had when we originally created it. The first 10 to 12 episodes were just myself and Johnny working through a variety of educational topics. And then we very quickly realized, well, we can't do this forever because there's just only so many things you could talk about in betting. And we started pivoting a little bit to having guests on, whether that be other experienced bettors, bookmakers, anyone who's really relevant in the industry. And that continued to evolve into just us talking regularly, not only in terms of educating people from a betting perspective, but talking about relevant industry topics as well. And we just recorded our 144th episode this week. We do one weekly. So it's been going pretty well. Obviously, it's a much bigger challenge to grow that type of content relative to the picks content, but it's something that I'm more passionate about. And part of the reason why is just because of my story. When I was younger and losing at betting, I consumed tons of picks content myself, and I thought I was getting a lot of value out of that, and then eventually realized, well, this isn't actually valuable at all. And I think one of the most important aspects from betting is just trying to encourage people to find their own path to win, and try to help them along that path, but not necessarily just give them the answers, because that creates a type of bettor that really, can't sustain that for the long run. So I'm pretty passionate about that altogether. I don't discriminate, honestly, against the other content. I don't mind it. I believe in capitalism, right? There's a market for everything. Now, I don't like the snake oil salesmen who are intentionally selling stuff that they know is complete garbage. And that's the issue that I find with the current content space, is that I don't have any issue with people doing picks content and putting picks out there on a daily basis. The issue I have is that a lot of these content creators misrepresent themselves as winners. And the less sophisticated bettors, the majority of the population, is not able to discern what is BS from what is not. So if you have a content creator out there who's claiming that they're a winning sports bettor and giving out picks, someone's going to find that and they're going to believe it. And I think there should be an onus on the content creator to be more transparent with the audience. And that's my biggest issue with the content space. So that's what I'm all about. That's what my brand preaches: transparency, honesty, integrity. If one day I lose my edge in sports betting, I'll talk about it. I have no issue doing that, because I just live my life as an open book, and people can choose whether or not they want to continue consuming what I'm doing or not. But I just can't get past. It really bothers me, the people who put themselves out there as winning bettors that aren't, because it's a very dangerous space. A lot of people will stumble upon that content and they're not able to tell what's real from what's not.
Yeah. There are a lot of differences between our the educational process that we had. Myself, I'm from games. I played chess and all kinds of games. I made the transition: chess, poker, sports betting. So it's probably a lot of similar from a lot of guys in the industry. And when I started to consume content in the US, especially in the US, before you guys came into the game, it always bothered me why the community was so harsh on touts, on guys who sold picks, because you have pretty good examples even in the US that I think they have good value. For instance, Ross, they have a product, they sell picks, and Ed Ross and his team, they are sharp. Man, they move markets and they are sharp. So it's I never understood why do people, especially on X, former Twitter, are so harsh, and the communities are so harsh on touts, because I think they also are a part of the ecosystem. And if we have groups that bet for a living, we need those guys in the ecosystem. So actually, I never understood that. Why is that? Why can you?
Yes. So
You
I
have
think
an
there's
opinion on that for sure.
I think there's a couple of reasons why. First and foremost, the majority of touts are actually losing bettors. So what tends to happen in this ecosystem is that the few winning touts, and actually ones that do it with integrity, they update their records every day, they keep track of all these things, they just get lumped in with the rest of the group for I don't know what particular reason, but that's just what seems to happen in the industry, because there's so many fakes and phonies out there. The ones that do it right, unfortunately, just get lumped in with the rest of them. There's also this secondary feeling of if you're touting, why not just bet your place instead? But people don't realize that, especially at some scales, it's just actually easier and it's more economic to just take the money from others in the form of pick sales rather than bet it yourself. I personally worked for a tout site for 1 year called Prediction Machine. And when I took it over, my main goal was to just basically turn it into a more reputable brand, right? Real time, play gets posted, it gets logged on the website, right? There's somebody can make their own decision on whether or not they want to buy, and they are getting the 100% facts without marketing angles. But too much of this space is just built off of marketing, and that's where all the touts get a bad rap, right? You could have a tout that is, lost money for the past calendar year, but they're going to find 3, 4, 5 trends to be able to promote themselves. 11-3 in my last 14 NBA picks or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's by nature a marketing sales type of business. And because of that, a lot of the pro bettors and the more sophisticated bettors just look down upon it.
Yeah, I understand that. But look, I'm outside the US content space. When I have time, I just listen to some good podcasts like your podcast. I listen to all the episodes. If you ask me, I remember for sure the one you had, Shift to Justice, Matthew, a very nice person, Matthew Trenhale. Those two are top level episodes. I could name more, but no need. But what I perceive, my perception of the industry is now that with more US states approving regulations to put gambling, bookies, especially European corporate bookies buying US, everything is shifting, and the content creation in the touts and the marketing, it's all over. And in the next 5 years, I don't see it coming backwards. I think it will scale. Is your perception the same as mine on that?
It's really challenging to say. I do think that there's going to be a point where things start to pivot. And that's going to be the point where too many people are realizing that they're losing at sports betting. And it's coming. In North America, sports betting, at least legalized sports betting, is fairly new. There's a lot of people that have just jumped into the pool. They're losing, but they will convince themselves that it's bad luck. I'm just speaking from my own life experiences when I was younger as well. And eventually there's going to be a point where people are just sick and tired of that. And they will start to seek out, in my opinion, more educational content and look to sharper resources to help them with sports betting. We're nowhere near that yet because there's too many people with large egos. They don't understand that sports betting is more of a math problem than it is knowing anything about sports for the most part. So you're going to get this influx of people into the market that are just going to lose. But at some point, there's going to be this leveling off point where the scale tips in the other direction. Because right now, there's a lot of people that are just selling the fun of sports betting. If you look at the advertising that exists in North America right now, a lot of it is around entertainment and pushing stuff like same game parlays, where you have a chance to bet a small amount of money to win a lot of money. The issue is that sports betting entertainment is somewhat tied to whether or not you win or lose. And of course, there's a rush you're going to get. There's the dopamine hit of betting on sports and getting a rush from watching that game. But over time, consistently losing, that tires you out. And it's going to tire out the population at some point or another. So I think at some point, and I don't know when it is, I would estimate probably 5 years from now, if I had to guess, there's going to be a tipping point where you just have so many people who are no longer betting because it's not fun for them anymore. And one of the inherent challenges in this space right now is trying to seek out good betting content. People don't know where to go. I mean, naturally, in our daily lives, right? If we're seeking out anything, most of us are just going to Google it, right? If we're trying to acquire information, we go to Google, we type it in, and we trust what Google is going to return to us as a result. Go into your Google search bar, type in how to bet on sports, how to win at betting on sports. You're not going to get the most educational pieces as your top hits. You're going to get the biggest affiliates in spots 1, 2, and 3. Sportsbook, direct sportsbook content from FanDuel, all of this stuff being relatively useless to the bettor. So it's very hard to overcome losing right now. 98% of bettors in North America are losing. That's not going to change anytime soon because the access to information is just not there. And what ends up happening and perpetuating this even more is what happens when everything that people are consuming is all talking about the same things. Bet against the public, do a reverse line movement, do all these things that don't really matter. When you get the 1 to 2% of people like my podcast, like Circlesoff, trying to educate people as to why this is nonsense, the vast majority of people do not believe that because they've just been conditioned to bet in this manner, and they can't come to the grips of reality that I'm not a winning bettor. People just can't, for whatever reason, I think a lot of it is ego, come to those grips. So it's a very long-winded answer, but right now we're on this path. We're this direct path of what's happening now, in my opinion, is not changing over the course of the next couple of years. But eventually, over time, there's going to be enough of a population that's like, I've had enough of this, and they are going to start to seek out quality sports betting content.
Yeah, I really, I'm sure you touched some important questions over there. The SEO in Google nowadays allows, I'm going to use a strong word, shitty content to be on top of very nice, good, clean content. That's one reason. I think the world is a different world now than it was like 10, 20 years ago, because our generation, maybe some guys in these new generations are like that also. I don't mean to be misinterpreted, but our generation, we had less information at our disposal, so we could maybe figure out more easily what was the good content and separate it from good from bad content. And I think it was easier for us to don't be so, because there is a garbage. I remember I was in ICE last year,
Mhm.
and there was a guy, I'm not naming companies, but there was a guy and he created like a special product, and the product consisted in, you have a sport event, and the guys that are in the trading rooms, the ones that don't move on air and they have real traders inside still, they have a leverage and they can have 3 times the max amount, for instance, on risk, and the guys in the trading room say, look, we have too much money on player X or team B, don't ever.
Mhm.
And so he presses a button, and in the promos, a question like team A never wins or never loses, blah blah blah. And this, they are starting to influence the better. So all the tools that are being created nowadays are being created for B2B purpose, the big companies, and all the marketing is very complex nowadays. I'm pretty sure that's one of the reasons I don't bet as much. I have a question for you. It's not in our script, but I have a question for you, because you probably are much better suited to answer than me, in case we had COVID. COVID changed a lot of things in the industry, and one of the things that changed with COVID was that all major sports were kind of stopped, except the Belarusian soccer and Nicaraguan soccer for sure. But what about esports? Is that a new breed of sports better? Is that even sports betting? Can you help us on this?
Yeah. So right prior to COVID was right around the last time that I was consulting for an offshore gaming group at that time. Pretty well known. I'm not going to name the name, but they have tons of sports betting, casino, and poker properties across the world. So I would consult for this group in a commercial capacity. So for people who don't know, basically they would open up their books to me and I'd have access to all their metrics. And they basically ask me, how can we make this market more efficient or our operation more efficient? And one of the big things that this group was trying to do, and this is around 2019, 2020, and probably still happening today, is figure out esports and why they cannot get esports handle up. Because all you hear about is the growth of gaming. You see, especially in North America, you actually have arenas selling out for esports events where you have 20,000 people gathering to watch this, yet they cannot figure out a way to drive these people to betting. I have a couple of theories on it, but first and foremost, I think it's just very different personas. I really do. I've done a lot of studies on this, but the sports betting products as they are created right now, very traditional. I mean, the sports books we know now, Bet365, DraftKings, MGM, FanDuel, other European books, whatever. There's not been a lot of innovation from those for several years. And when you look at esports and gaming, there's tons of innovation in gaming. Look at video games 5 years ago, even compared to how they are now. That person who's following video games is used to like a certain level of creativity, very different types of products than the traditional sportsbook products right now. And if you have an esports, someone who's never bet on anything before, go to a sportsbook to try to bet on esports. It's just way too convoluted and does not speak the language. It's almost like a different language altogether. So I think what you're going to see, starting to see it a little bit more so in the crypto space, but it's companies who just focus only on esports. We're going to build a product for just esports wagering, and we're not going to do anything else. We're not going to have soccer. We're not going to have American football. Another thing with the esports bettor is that they don't want esports diminished by actual sports. They want it treated for someone who follows esports, Dota, World of Warcraft, something like that. This is the NFL for them. This is, the World Cup of soccer for them. They don't want to go to a sports book and see it 20 tiers below everything else, and they got to click 10 times to go and bet it. That you might as well just slap that person right across the face, because they don't want to see that. In their mind, esports is number one, actual sports is below that. So I think people have not really figured out the way yet to speak to that community of potential bettors. Pinnacle did a good job when Marco Bloom was there. They were generating a lot of handle, but even then, it's a blip of what that market should be as a whole. So I think at some point, it's something that needs to be solved at a product level, and there's just more research that needs to be done on that specific segment of the population, because they are completely different than a traditional sports bettor.
Yeah, that's another great question. Answer. Sorry, you touched a word that now is going to make the podcast last 5 hours. I'm sorry for that, but you touched a very important word, crypto. And crypto now opens the door for so many things, my friend. So I need to ask you 2 or 3 opinions on crypto, because I have seen maybe in the last year, okay, let's give it a year, under the DeFi nominations to emerge so many exchanges, so many books, so many things, and the protocols, they are very solid. Some of them, we had guests here that they are very bullish on Bitcoin. We have others that believe that Monaco protocol is perfect for a lot of things, especially for exchanges. How do you see the traditional industry against the more advanced, technologically advanced, let me say it like this, the industry that is emerging now in the crypto world? What you are in Canada, of course, you cannot speak because you don't use this kind of stuff. For you, I might say, only use legal sports books from Canada. But do you have interesting things to share with us on crypto?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, the younger population, I'm bullish on crypto over the long run, just because the younger generation is brought up nowadays using technology, right? And I remember the biggest argument I've ever had with my father in my life, and this is going back to maybe 2019, and it was about Bitcoin, and him just telling me, because I was an early adopter of Bitcoin. This is because of my betting at the time, but we were transacting in crypto. It's an easy way to send money. And he's just telling me, like, Rob, this is garbage. Like, this is a Ponzi, and you got to get your money out of there. And I'm trying to explain to him, like, you grew up in the banks, with banks, and that's all you know. This is foreign to you, but this is eventually going to change things. And we're seeing that with the younger population, right? There's lots of use cases for crypto nowadays. Is it ever going to be you're going to go to the grocery store and you're going to be able to scan your Bitcoin wallet to buy your groceries? I think we're ways away from that. Like, some people want to make that more realistic than it is now. But for people to acquire crypto, transact in it, that's very daunting for my 65-year-old father. It's not for 25-year-old kid, 20-year-old kid nowadays. So I just think naturally, the way that technology is taking over the world, it would be dumb to just ignore this as some sort of scam, especially when there's lots of use cases and people actually transact with these nowadays. Now, of course, there's some scams in this. Listen, I was early with the NFT boom. I made some money off certain things. Other ones were completely underwater. There's the fear of missing out or whatever. But from a pure product perspective, I think you continue to see crypto sports books, crypto casinos, and there's always going to be an appetite for those because there's actually just enough of a market for that from the younger generation now. So I don't like to speculate on the price, what's it going to be in this year and what's it going to be in, everyone this is not financial advice, but I like to maintain a certain section of my, investments or portfolio that are in higher risk, because I'm a bettor and I can deal with the risk. I think crypto is a high risk investment that has the ability to pay off handsomely or to be, underwater. But I always think crypto products are going to exist in the gaming space, and that there's always going to be demand for them, just because you're coming through with this younger generation of people that are growing up with this technology. And it's not, everyone wants to talk about how overwhelming it is to get a crypto wallet, and it's overwhelming if you've never done it before. But now, once you're starting to get brought up with that, then it's going to completely change the game.
Yeah, no, I ask you this because I think the exchanges in the crypto world will solve many of the problems that nowadays we are dealing with. Maybe not you guys over there, but in several parts of the world, we are dealing with a strong liquidity problem because the max bets are diminishing in the exchanges that now are appearing, and other bookies are solving this particular problem because these type of exchanges, for instance, the big syndicates, they have their own liquidity. They put the liquidity and they say to smaller groups, okay, come and get us. This is here. You want to make a bet? You can make a bet right here, right now in this exchange with us. So this was more or less the question I had for you, because I think these protocols will endure. And 10 years from now, we are not really sure where we are, but these exchanges, for sure, many of them are here, and they are an answer for kind of these questions.
Yeah, for sure. And listen, there's lots of exchanges that are trying to run regulated businesses in North America now. So I'm in Canada, but particularly in Ontario, there's a legal exchange that's popped up recently. You have some in New Jersey, but the issue, like you said, is the liquidity, right? Like I like the exchange model, but there are just outdated laws in North America that make this impossible. Like the U.S. Wire Act was created, to prevent Al Capone from laundering money and across state. Has nothing to do with anything that's relevant nowadays. It doesn't need to exist, but it's so low on the list of priorities of what the federal government is going to change that, this is just the situation. I would love to be able to bet in an exchange where the liquidity pool is shared across North America. And that's the advantage to the crypto exchanges, is you can have worldwide liquidity. What you get the bigger groups to seed the market. You give them a small rebate on whatever they post, or no commission or whatever. And it just functions. So I love that as an idea, but also that works a lot better for the more sophisticated bettor, which is in the minority. The average guy out there who wants to bet 10 NBA player props every single night, you show them an exchange and they're going to go cross-eyed. Like they just, what the hell is this? So there's a niche for it, but I'm a big believer in crypto exchanges. I think they serve a very solid function for the ecosystem, and I think those will be around long term.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure if they can solve the liquidity, and they will. I'm not saying all of them. The ones who have good market makers are going to, and they are going to thrive, because the exchange model is a very smart model, and it can endure. I am a new sports bettor. I turned 21 right now. I want to start sports betting, and I can ARB, I can middle, I can buy picks to touts. Write me a script. What should I do? You need to help younger guys. You are talking to a very huge Brazilian community right now, and they are not fans of niche sports, but they all know what MMA is. They all know where to start. Tell us.
So it starts with some basic knowledge before you even get into sports betting. I mentioned it probably about half an hour ago, but the understanding that sports betting is more of a math problem than it is being a sports fan. I think people need to get that and understand that right out of the get-go. The second thing people need to understand right out of the get-go is expect to lose in the early going. People go in with these aspirations of, I'm going to start betting, I'm going to deposit $500 here, I'm going to turn this into big money, and it's not going to happen because they are conditioned. They're not conditioned to really understand how betting works. Most bettors out there, if you take a poll of bettors, they think like these lines originate in Vegas, and Vegas knows. They have no idea how a betting market works. If you sit down and you explain to someone, you are competing against the sportsbook. You're physically placing your bet with the sportsbook, but you're actually competing against other bettors in the market who are shaping these lines. Bettors who have sophisticated models, work in larger groups. People would be like, well, this is actually way more daunting than I thought. That's the reality of the situation. So people need to know that. Now, I'm not discouraged. I don't want to discourage people from, I think betting can be fun. You do things the right way. First and foremost, try to get access to as many outs as you can within reason. I'm not saying go put your money into every single sports book within your region, but if you can afford to do that, probably best to do that, because the sportsbook edge comes from the VIG that they charge on games. And by spreading your money out across multiple books, you can find the best price whenever you're going to bet on a game. And that now reduces the rate that you need to win as a bettor to profit. So you might go from 52.4% to 51% if you're betting across 5 books. And that becomes much more achievable. But even if you're not winning, you're losing slower, which is also important in sustaining a bankroll and having fun betting. So that's one piece of advice that I would give. The second, I would say immediately out of the gate, avoid alternate bet types as fun as they may seem. I would stick to straight wagers as much as possible. You can go to parlays and same game parlays when you have an actual edge on sports betting. That's a great way to start compounding your edge. You know, people are always like, oh, parlay's bad, avoid them. It's mostly true because most of the bettors lose and they should avoid parlays. But the winning bettors, it's a great way to compound your edge. But in the early going, straight wagers, spread your money out across different reputable books where, you know, you don't have a large risk of getting stiffed or the book just shuts down tomorrow or anything like that. And you're already in a much better position than everyone else, even if you know nothing about sports. It's much harder to lose very quickly that way. So that's kind of like your early game plan, but crack all your bets, closing line value specifically, and you can use this to fine tune your process, right? You might be a very good props bettor, but you're losing all your money betting on soccer totals or something like that. You track all of your bets specifically, you can find out where you're having success, what you need to cut out of the equation. You have to treat it like investing, really, is what it comes down to. And that's a lot for a 21-year-old to process, but that's what you're up against when you're in your sports betting. Like, we have to live in reality here. Yeah. And that's just the reality of the situation.
I have a personal opinion. We are now in the betting. We bet like we do in life. There is a common sentence, like you are in chess, like you are in life. In the betting space, it's practically the same, because we have past experience and past tools that we put in our toolkit, and now we use them as a sports bettor that influence our decision-making process, everything. And I would like, if you want to share with us, of course, a story, because I've seen you so many times talking about your family, your father, your grandfather, your childhood must have been a very happy one, but it also gave you some things that now you bring to the game and that can leverage and make you sometimes, especially in the losing runs, be more resilient. And that kind of resilience is only when you have a strong family background or when you have some episodes. Is there something you think you are special? Is there any weapon you acquired when you were young and you haven't thought about sports betting at all, that now you think it's very useful in your common days as a bettor?
Yeah, so the ability to be honest with myself, I think, is very important. And you know, I learned, my parents were great to me growing up. I really respect my father and my mother. They did a very good job raising me, my brother, and my sister, but more so like instilling specific morals within our family that we can live by. And honesty is very important to me. And I think for sports bettors, the quicker you can be honest with yourself about certain things, the better off you're going to be in the long run, right? Because some people, I'm about continuous improvement, right? How do you improve as a sports bettor if you're living in a false reality, right? You want to tell yourself, I'm getting so unlucky on these games or whatever, but it's not rooted in anything. Like, you're just spinning a lie to yourself. So for me, one thing that my dad was very strict with me about when I was young, and, at the time, I go home with a B+ on a test, and you're like, that's a good mark. And he'd be like, well, okay, where did you go wrong here? What are your weaknesses? Why don't you spend more time studying on these things that you can't grasp the knowledge of than studying these things that you know really well? When you're preparing for these tests and for your exams in college, why are you spending so much time preparing for these things that you already do well and not focusing on these things that you struggle with? You don't have to attribute equal time to all of this. And a lot of that's applicable to sports betting, right? You track all your stuff, you find your niche, and you say, okay, I'm really good at doing this. I don't need to change things here, but I really struggle with this. And I need to figure out why I'm struggling with this. And I mean, everyone's raised in a different way. There's learning habits that work for some people and don't work for others. But for me, I've always taken a very analytical approach, and that was kind of ingrained on me by the way I was brought up. My father was an accountant. He's very good with numbers, and that kind of always worked for me. But you have to be open and honest with yourself at all times in sports betting. And if you're not, you're just always going to head down a worse path, because you cannot possibly improve at anything unless you actually know where you're at. So that's a big thing for me. And I honestly really think about that a lot, not only just with myself, my audience. I think just living your life as an open book will get you a long way.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Rob Pizzola. I have learned so much today, and I would like you, Rob, to say hello. I'm not sure if you want to, you have already, but to give an advice or to say anything, we are going to leave your Circlesoff link below. And I'm not sure if you have time, because you are very busy for sure, but maybe people can approach you on X and send you a hi or something like that. So
absolutely. My DMs are always open on X at Rob Pizzola. You can DM me anytime. Sometimes it takes me a little bit of time to get back to you, but I will get back to everyone on X if you want to DM me. So that's always there. You can check out Circlesoff for sure, which is my podcast. You can check it out on YouTube or on Spotify, Apple Podcasts as well. But one thing that I just want to leave on with everybody and kind of really change things for me as a bettor is that you have to be open-minded in betting. And that's a big thing for me. I used to dismiss so many things. When I first joined X, Twitter, back in the day, I was a losing bettor, posting my picks to Twitter every single day. I had a lot of, in hindsight, reputable winning bettors who actually were trying to help me. And I viewed it as them potentially attacking me, or like, I know more than this person. Being open-minded in this space and being a sponge and being able to absorb information is very valuable. So don't be closed-minded with anything. There's tons of different ways to beat sports betting. I love when people call each other out and they're like, oh, you should never do this, you should never do that. It's like, you could do whatever you want. Everybody has things that are going to work for them. It's about carving out your own niche, finding a process that works for you, and going with that. And of course, you can continuously improve it, but you have to be open-minded about the situation. So that's the biggest thing for me. I get so much resistance when I try to talk to people about what I consider to be very basic sports betting concepts that they just don't understand, or that they're maybe not conditioned to understand because they've heard something differently their entire life, right? You know how many people think that Vegas sports books have some sort of insider knowledge on so many of these games? The bettors actually shape the market. The sports books are moving because of this. It took me 10 years to figure this out because I was just dismissing things that people would tell me. So don't make the same mistakes I did is basically one thing that I would like to preach before I leave. Be open-minded about sports betting. Try to absorb what you can, and you'll be better off for it.
Pessoal, boa noite. Foi um episódio com o Rob, deixou aqui vários conselhos importantes para se pensar sobre eles. Eu acho que o mais importante é nós olharmos para aquilo que estas pessoas que estão na indústria há tantos anos nos trazem, e é um prazer estar com vocês, hoje sem o Divino e sem o Lucas. Espero que para a próxima eles estejam aqui com uma dose reforçada de talento, e até já. Daqui a uns minutos vemos-nos no outro episódio. Um grande abraço a todos, é um prazer estar aqui com vocês.